Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. It is time for another monthly wrap up. So today I'm going to be talking about my March wrap up. And I have my book journal here so I can make sure not to miss any of the things that I read in the month of March. Just before we get started, I have to warn you that March was, for whatever reason, a month that totally got away from me. It was a really odd month because if we look at things factually, I read the most books in March that I have read this year. So I read 15 books in March. However, I ended up not being able to read some of the books I wanted to read and having to not follow through on some buddy reads because I didn't have a lot of time for reading. And the things that I actually did read ended up being really short things. Like I read a lot of graphic novels or a lot of short novels or listened to a lot of audiobooks in March. So I didn't find myself with a lot of free reading time where I could just sit down and read a book and spend several hours reading. I didn't get a lot of that in March. And there was a couple different reasons for that. I had some family things that were happening, some health things that were happening. And so I just wasn't able to do the reading that I had hoped I would be able to do. But I did read a lot of things that I really, really liked in March. So I'm excited to talk about the things that I was able to get to. It's just that some of the things that I was hoping I was going to be able to read this month, I did not get to. And this was not a fault of the TBR or a fault of me not wanting to follow through on the books that I had decided to read. It was just a question of time and not having the time to be able to physically read. But this is the month that I have been the most grateful for audiobooks because I had a lot of house things that I had to do that I was able to do while listening to audiobooks, and that really helped save my reading month. So we will get into it and I will talk about all of the things that I was able to read. So I'm just flipping through here now to make sure that I find it. So my very first read of the month was a continuation of the Natural History of Dragons series. So that was book 2 in the Memoirs of Lady Trent, and that book is called Tropic of Serpents. And I gave that book 5 stars. I am still really, really loving this series. I really enjoyed the setting for book 2. I think book 2 touched on some of the issues that maybe pop up with book 1, which is we have Lady Trent, who is this very, in some ways, naive young woman who doesn't fully understand the position that she holds in society as a woman of standing and a woman of stature in her home country, and how she just kind of imposes her will on other people as she goes and travels into these other countries and assumes that she should be given the right to do what she wants because of her love of dragons and because her intentions are pure. She thinks that she can divorce herself from kind of the geopolitical atmosphere of the countries that she visits. And in book 2, she starts to find out that this is very much not true. And I think we see a lot of character growth from her in that respect in book 2. Lady Trent continues to be a fantasy character that I absolutely love. I really love her. Again, I think, like I've talked about this so many times, I think that she's so smart, so funny, so passionate. I really love seeing female characters who are portrayed in that way. And even though I know that this is not going to be the series for everyone, and I could totally understand if somebody picked it up and said, this is really boring. She's just narrating her life. Yeah, she is. And her life is awesome. And I love it so much. So I am still really, really enjoying this series. And I gave 5 stars to book 2. And I also read book 3 this month. So you'll hear, last month. So you will hear about that as well in a second. After Tropic of Serpents, I read The Keeper's 6. So I gave this one 4 stars. This is a novella that came out this year. And it actually inspired one of the videos that I did on the channel recently, which was a dragon recommendations book. This novella follows a woman who is actually a grandmother and her adult son is kidnapped. So the book opens up and she's woken up in the middle of the night by a phone call, and it's her son. And she can tell that he is in distress, and she believes that he's trying to communicate something with her that he doesn't want anybody else to find out about. So she kind of rushes off to his house to check up on him and finds that his family, so his husband and their 3 children, have been put into a magical sleep. And she's not sure what happened, but it feels like her son's magic. So she thinks that her son has put his own family to sleep so that they wouldn't wake up and then something bad would happen to them. And so she has to determine who came for her son, what happened, what kind of a conflict was there, and how can I rescue him. And then we find out that this main character, the mother/grandmother, actually has a very interesting past and has been convicted of a crime. So she used to be part of a magical team that would kind of go out into the universe and explore and handle jobs. And because of something that happened on one of her missions, she has been suspended and she's not allowed to use her typical magic. She's not supposed to get her team back together. But obviously her son has been stolen. And so she puts a call out to her old team members and they all answer the call. So she has to go out and try to rescue her son. So it becomes like this rescue mission, but there's also this element of found family because you see this team that she used to be a part of, and there's a lot of interpersonal stress that's involved with that team because of what had happened to them in the past and the repercussions that was having for everybody on the team. And it was really interesting. There was a lot of really good character stuff and a lot of really good world building stuff in a novella. So in a very short amount of pages. I really liked it. I gave it 4 stars because, as with most novellas that I read, I always wish that they were just novels. Like, I always wish that I just had a full story. This was still, I think, very satisfying, from the world building to the characters to the plot. I thought that it was really good. It was very easy to read, but I just wanted more. And that's less of a criticism and just more of a want, but it made me want to go on and read some of Kate Elliott's other work. So this was great. It was a great combination of sci-fi and fantasy. There's obviously magical elements, and there are magical creatures because this book does involve dragons with kind of a unique spin that I had not seen before. And it also involves like space travel and tech and using tech to accomplish your goals. So definitely a really good meld of sci-fi and fantasy if you are someone who finds that they enjoy stories that kind of bleed through those kind of overlapping genres. But was really happy that I picked this one up. This was a new release that I had on my most anticipated releases of 2023, and I'm happy that I was able to get to it early in the year. After that, I read The Doors of Eden by Adrian Tchaikovsky. So this was kind of an impulse read. Oh, I gave this one 3.5 stars. So this was kind of an impulse read. I had seen it at the library, and I have been on a big Adrian Tchaikovsky kick. I have been really enjoying his stories. I find, as I have said too many times on the channel, that he is a very versatile author. All of his books feel different, even though there are some common threads that manage to find their way in there. I think that they all feel very unique and very distinct from one another. And so when I saw this at the library, I was like, well, this is a standalone. I'm just going to grab it and I'm going to read it. And I did end up liking it, but I thought that the pacing dragged a little bit in this one, and that is really the entire reason that the rating was brought down, is that I think that it probably could have been edited. There were some characters, because this is a multi-POV story, there were some characters that I wasn't as interested in as others, and it opened up, I will say. So this book, I'm not going to tell you a lot about it because if you do want to read it, it's more fun to find out as you go. But the setup is that there are 2 young girls, 2 best friends who are cryptid hunters. So they go looking for weird, magical, mysterious monsters like the Loch Ness Monster or Bigfoot. They look for announcements or news articles or internet articles about these monsters and then go to try to hunt them down and record themselves to upload it on YouTube or whatever. And at the beginning of the story, they get a report of something that seems like it could actually be real. And when they go to investigate, something happens to make them think that alternate universes might be a possibility. And then as the book continues, you are brought into this story where you find out that parallel universes do in fact exist, and there is something that is causing them to bleed together. And interspersed with the regular story, you get Adrian Tchaikovsky writing these interludes that take you through the history of these various parallel universes, and you see how sentient life evolved and which organisms came out on top of that evolutionary process and how that differed from universe to universe, which was really cool. The interludes were really, really cool. Adrian Tchaikovsky, anything that has to do with like zoology and evolutionary biology, he always nails it. Like, those parts of his books are always awesome. And it was really, really cool in this one as well. But I will say that the opening chapter where these 2 friends are going off to investigate this potentially like weird, bizarre creature, so good. One of the strongest opening chapters that I have ever read in a science fiction novel. I was gripped. I was scared. I was interested. I thought that I was going to love this book. And I think maybe the rest of the book suffered a little bit because that first chapter just set such a high bar for me that the rest of it felt like it came down a little bit from there. But if you like parallel universes, if you enjoy Adrian Tchaikovsky's writing, if you like that kind of like evolutionary exploration, how life has kind of like deviated, what small changes in the universe could have led to a completely different outcome. If you like those questions and you want to think about those questions, I still think this book is worth your time. I just personally think it could have been edited down a little bit more, and some of the primary characters could have been fleshed out a little bit more. But I'm still happy that I read it. I am still determined to continue on my path to read all of the Adrian Tchaikovsky work that I can, and I don't regret having picked this one up from the library. After that, we got our second Adrian Tchaikovsky of the month. So this one was a buddy read with my friend Colton. We read this together and both ended up really enjoying it. This book is called Dogs of War, and I gave this one 4 stars. This is the first book in a duology, and I think the duology is just called Dogs of War, but the second book is called Barehead. And this is really cool. This is a really fun, short novel. This is definitely going to make it onto like a palate cleanser recommendation video sometime down the road, but it is about a group of bioweapons. So humanity has been experimenting, making biological weapons, and so they have interbred, I don't even know that it's interbred. They have made this being that is made with part animal DNA, part human DNA, part complete like AI tech. And there's various animals that make up these combat teams. And the character that we follow in this book is a dog. So he is the leader of a squad. He has like the head body, like genetically engineered body of a dog, but is humanoid in appearance and is able to talk and communicate and execute orders. And then we also have, like, as other members of the team, there's a bear, there is a collection of bees, there's a dragon, lots of really cool creatures that make up this squad. And so it is a first-person story where we really get inside the head of this character. And that can be a little bit jarring because Adrian Tchaikovsky, along with being really good at writing about biology and writing about animals, also embodies like the personality of an animal really well. So when you're reading about this character, you really feel like he's a dog. And like the actions that he takes, the way that he thinks, the things that he does, the responses that he has to certain situations felt very authentic. And so it takes a little bit of time to get used to that. But after that, I think that it's really gripping. This was, like I said, a short, self-contained, not overly complex book, but it was really, really enjoyable. If you are looking for something that is going to be like pulpy, sci-fi fun with some themes that are pretty deep and will resonate with you, like I think like fairly strongly, I would definitely recommend picking this one up. I am absolutely going to read the second book in the duology, which is called Barehead, and I'm really happy I got to this one. This is one of Adrian Tchaikovsky's books that I had never even heard of before. It gets like zero airtime that I can see. I have not seen anybody else talk about it. I didn't even know that it existed. So I am happy that I finally decided, or I finally was told about this book and then was able to pick it up because it was a really great time. After that one, we had the next Lady Trent book, which is Voyage of the Basilisk. Also did this one on audio, and I also gave this one 5 stars. I am not going to apologize. Like, I can't imagine that I'm sure all of them will be 5 stars. So if you're looking for like an objective review, maybe I'll be able to gather my thoughts and do a series review after this and outline some of the things that are truly strengths and weaknesses of the series. But for right now, this is just my comfort series. Listening to it makes me so happy. I enjoy hearing about Lady Trent and her adventures. When I turn it on, it feels like soothing. I just am able to totally feel immersed in the story, and I'm super, super happy that I picked this up. I imagine it's probably going to end up being one of my favorite fantasy series, and I can't wait to continue on with it. After that, we had Kindred, which is one of the books that I picked up from the library. This was a book that I picked up for my classic sci-fi series that I do here on the channel, and I actually do have a video review recorded for Kindred. It's just that along with not having a lot of time to read last month, I didn't have a lot of time to upload videos either. So hoping to get that one up this week, but I really love this book. I gave it 4.5 stars. I'm not going to talk about it in a great amount of depth right here because I did do that in-depth review, but I will just say that this was an incredibly emotional read. I think that it should be required reading. I can see why people love Kindred so much, and I'm really, really glad that I picked it up. I had only ever read Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler, but at least that did prepare me for how dark her stories can get. So I went into Kindred expecting that, and so did not find that it was as abrupt, I guess, as Parable of the Sower. Because when I went into Parable of the Sower, I was not prepared for how dark it was going to be, and I was like, wow, this is a lot. I don't think that I was emotionally prepared for Parable of the Sower, but Kindred, I was prepared. It still really hurt. It was still devastating, but I was prepared for it, at least. But I really, really, really enjoyed Kindred. After Kindred, I read the Grandmaster of Cultivation, the first volume of the manhwa. So this is the book that came in second place for my favorite reads of 2022. This is a fantasy, a Chinese fantasy about people who practice cultivations. They use like this combination of swordplay and magic, and there's a lot of political intrigue, a lot of really good and complex character dynamics, and I really, really, really love the story. And this is the first volume of the manhwa, or the comic kind of serialization of this book, and it was lovely. I really enjoyed the artwork. It is condensed, obviously, to be put into this graphic novel form, but I thought that the art was really nice. It was fun to approach the story in a new way, and I will definitely continue along with the series. So I was happy to be able to pick that one up. After that, I read Fevered Star. So this was an audiobook that I picked up from the library. We're getting into like all of the audiobooks that I started listening to. But I picked this one up from the library. I was supposed to read this last year with my friend Igor, and he had read it, and a lot of people had read it at that time and felt that it was a pretty big letdown from the first book in this series, which was Black Sun. And Black Sun was excellent, and I really, really wanted to love Fevered Star. But then the reception was lukewarm at best, and I got kind of nervous and just ended up not reading it last year. But I finally picked it up, and I actually ended up giving it 4 stars. I really liked it. I loved Black Sun, and I can absolutely understand why people felt like this did not live up to the first novel, because I do think that it is a very second novel. It does have a very like bridging novel feeling. Our characters at the end of Black Sun had this like very fast-paced plot with this explosive ending, and I think when I at least went into book 2, I was really excited to see like what the resolution of that was going to be. And what we were given in Fevered Star was a very methodical, kind of slower-paced story, where a lot of our character motivations and actions feel like they deviate a lot from book 1. I personally didn't mind that, because I think a lot of the fallout from book 1 made the characters' actions make sense, at least in my mind. I didn't feel like they were poorly characterized. I think it was just frustrating to watch them do some of the things that they did, and so that made it probably a less enjoyable experience for a lot of people. And like I said, this did not reach the same heights as the first book. The first book was really something special, I think. It was really different in terms of setup and execution and lore and mythology. And we do, like, this second one does feel like it takes those normal fantasy like bumps. You know, we see the normal kind of like rise and fall of action. It doesn't feel like it's doing anything particularly groundbreaking, but I still felt really connected to the characters. I'm very interested to see where it goes, and I'm very much looking forward to book 3. So I'm actually really happy that I finally got around to listening to this one, because it does have me hyped up for book 3. I don't know if that's coming this year or if it's going to be coming next year, or who knows, maybe the year after. But whenever it does come out, I will be super excited to read it. After that, I got into, and I'm just going to talk about all these in one big chunk, even though I read them kind of like interspersed throughout the rest of the month. But I got back into reading Monster. So this was a manga series that I started reading with Jimmy so that we can discuss it, which is about a young Japanese doctor who works in Germany, who performs brain surgery on a young boy and saves his life. And this young boy turns out to be a monster. And so throughout these series, we find our young doctor kind of chasing this boy across Europe, trying to figure out who he is and exactly what he wants, while also grappling with the fact that he is the person who saved his life. So does he bear some sort of responsibility for the actions that he has taken since then? And it is I guess the best descriptor is like a psychological thriller. It is very exciting. Each volume just gets better and better as you go on. This month I read, I think it was 4 to 7. Yeah, so 4, 5, 6, and 7. They were all 4.5 stars. I am really loving this series and I cannot wait to read the last 2. So I will definitely be reading those very soon at the beginning of April. And I'm going to be super excited to discuss this series with Jimmy. Other than Monster, the next book that I listened to was The Phantom Tollbooth. So I also gave this one 4.5 stars. I listened to this one on audio and it was delightful. I had never read The Phantom Tollbooth. It's one of those like classic children's fantasy novels that I had never gotten around to. And I would classify it as like the same level as Chronicles of Narnia. And it's kind of, it's reminiscent, I think, of Alice in Wonderland. So I actually had no idea what The Phantom Tollbooth was about, but it was available from the library as an ebook or as an audiobook, and it was pretty short. So I thought, okay, well, I do some of the chores that I have to do. I can listen to this. And I listened to it, and then I got Juliet to listen to it, and we both really, really liked it. It is about a young boy whose life is bland and boring, and he doesn't find any purpose or any happiness in school or playing. He feels bored all the time and listless, and so he receives a package, and in this package there is a toll booth that he plays with, and as he plays with the toll booth he gets transported into an alternate land, and while he's there is given a quest that he has to go and fulfill. And it's a really like kooky story with a lot of wordplay and puns, and I just thought it was really fun. Interestingly enough, after I finished it, I noticed when I went on Goodreads that Patrick Rothfuss has kind of like a scathing review of this book. He reviews a lot of books, and I have found actually some books I've really liked by reading his reviews on Goodreads. But he did not enjoy The Phantom Tollbooth, and I think that that's sad because I thought that it was really delightful. I think it was a really good one to read with your kids. There's a lot of funny wordplay that I think you could talk to them about, and it might be like the first time that they've been introduced to some of these concepts, like some of these puns or the way that you can mix language. It feels like a younger child's precursor to Terry Pratchett, like someone that you want to grow up to be a Discworld fan. You should get them to read The Phantom Tollbooth at an impressionable age, because then they will develop, I think, that love of whimsy and that sort of like language manipulation, and then perhaps go on to enjoy Terry Pratchett afterwards. But I thought that it was really good. I'm really happy that I finally got around to reading it. After that, I read another book that has been on my TBR for a really long time, and that is Tess of the Road. So I have talked about the book Serafina on my channel a few times, and this is by the same author and is a companion novel, but not directly related to the Serafina books. So the main character of this book, whose name is Tess, is actually one of Serafina's sisters. So we follow her story, and it happens in parallel with Serafina's story, but then kind of goes forward to the future. So this book does spoil some of the events of Serafina. So if you had never read anything by this author, whose name is Rachel Hartman, and you wanted to, then I still would recommend Serafina, because events in Serafina will be spoiled in Tess of the Road. But if you do not care about that and you just wanted to go into this book, then you could start here and read here, and you don't need any of that prior knowledge to understand what happens in Tess. This is a book, so I also listened to this one on audio, but I flipped back and forth for this one because I was really interested in it, and so there were some times when I did have some free time to read and I wanted to read it more quickly, so I read it physically. But this was a really tough book, and if I ever do in the future a recommendations video for fantasy novels that tackle mental health issues really well, then I would absolutely put Tess of the Road on here. The setup for this is that we have a young girl whose name is Tess. She's 16, I think, as this book opens up. She may be 17. And she has been ostracized by her family, by society. She has been shamed and shunned for some unknown event. We don't know what this is at the beginning of the book, but she has grown up in a very puritanical family, and you get this sense very early on that this has something to do with sexuality and her actions as a young woman and how they may have been outside of what her family expected for her. And so at the beginning of the story, she's trying to negotiate a marriage for her twin sister. And technically Tess is the person who's supposed to be on the marriage market because she is the older twin by 2 or 3 minutes or whatever. But her family has hidden this fact and is making it out like her younger sister is the older twin, and she has entered into high society, and Tess has helped her find a match. And so when her sister is to be married, she asks Tess to kind of move in with her and become her lady's maid and be the mother, or not the mother, what's the name in old books like Jane Eyre? It's not tutor. Oh gosh, the word governess. There we go. The governess for her future children. And Tess starts to feel very stifled by this. Like she is looking into a future for decades and decades where she's just stuck in a home with her sister, never able to live her own life, never able to do anything for herself. And she wants to break free. And so that is exactly what she does. She is able to get out on her own, and she undergoes a journey. And this journey there is a quest that becomes part of the story, but really what it is like Tess's journey to forgive herself. So she is grappling with a lot of really heavy mental health issues. So if you would like to read Tess of the Road, if you enjoy books that explore femininity and sexuality and religion and guilt and shame and depression and suicidal thoughts and any of those things, Tess of the Road is one of the best character studies of that kind that I have ever read. But Tess is a teenage girl, and I think Rachel Hartman characterizes her very well. And so she feels like a teenage girl who is going through all of these terrible things. So if that is not the headspace that you want to be in, you should not read this book because it feels like you are in that headspace. I found this book to be incredibly cathartic. It made me so sad and so happy, and so it made me feel so many emotions as I was reading it. It's very slow paced. It is deeply introspective. There's not a lot of plot that's happening. There is ostensibly a plot in the background, but it's not really what the story is about. But I loved it. I thought it was so, so good. The reason that it got 4.5 stars for me was kind of a nitpicky thing, but at the beginning of the story, there's a character who's really mean and really rude, and Rachel Hartman, through Tess, only focuses on his size, and he's an overweight person, and it felt not good. Like, it didn't seem like the kind of thing that it wasn't written in a way where I felt like Rachel Hartman was berating Tess for thinking this way. It felt very much like the old fantasy trope of like, fat person is bad. Like they're the bad guy, they're the villain. And I did not like that. And it did take off that 0.5 star for me. But Rachel Hartman handles all the other issues so well that I'm wondering if maybe I'm just, like, it just personally made me uncomfortable. And she actually was calling out Tess for acting that way, because that character does end up like being brought up throughout the story. So I don't know. I'm going to read, this is a duology as well. I'm going to read the second book. I'm going to see if there's anything else about that in there. I don't remember having those same thoughts about anything in Serafina, so I don't know if this is a common trope that comes up in her other books. But if you are someone who really, really hates that trope, it does come up here. So just be wary of that. After that, the last book that I read for the month, I'm just looking now. Yep, that's the last one, was Stoner. So this is one that carried over from my February TBR because I had started it in February and finished it in March. And I gave Stoner 4.5 stars. Stoner was a beautiful, horribly depressing book. It took me so long to read this book because it hurt me to read it. Stoner, if you have not heard anybody else on BookTube talk about it, is a work of literary fiction by John Williams about a man named William Stoner. He is a professor at a university. And this is just a look at his life, how he became a professor, what his life was like as a professor leading up to his death. And that is not a spoiler. At the beginning of the book, you know that Stoner has died. And then we go back and look at his life and, you know, what happened to him and how it all played out. And I have never read a book that made you feel made me feel the visceral sensation of the like hopeless, mundane quality of life. And to be fair, I'm a very optimistic person. Like I am able to see the good in a lot of things. I don't often feel hopeless or down or particularly nihilistic about the universe and my place in it. I don't. But this book hits on all of the questions that I have ever had about that and all of the like moments of doubt that I have ever felt in my life. The characterization is exquisite. The situations that the author puts this man through are so terribly bleak and so sad, but so ordinary. There's nothing out of the ordinary that happens. This is just like the slow monotony of a life that didn't manage to live up to its potential. And it is heartbreakingly sad. I am really glad that I read it, but this is going to be one of those books that I don't know if I will ever reread. There was a particular part of this book, and anyone who has read it, if I just say that it was about Stoner, his wife, and his relationship with his daughter, they will know exactly what I mean. I had to close it and put it away because it made me so sad. The character of Stoner is a particularly passive man, and it can be very frustrating, but I also felt so badly for him. I wanted him to rise up and have the life that he could have led, and it was so heartbreaking to watch it play out the way that it did. I think that this book demonstrates what depression can look like and how it can affect someone, how it changes the color and the contour of their life, what can help it and what it means to come out of it. And it's just really well done. This man was an absolutely brilliant author. Between Augustus and Stoner, I really admire his writing, and I am very much looking forward to reading his Western sometime this year. But if you like literary fiction and you have not picked up Stoner, then I would highly recommend it. Just go in knowing that you are you're in for something that's going to be really, really sad. But I am happy that I picked it up. I'm happy that I finally finished it. It's just going to take me some time to recover from the reading of it. But that's it. That was my March. Like I said, it's not like it was a bad reading month. I actually read quite a bit. It's just most of it was either on audiobook or it was a very short book like Stoner, which comes in under 200 pages, or it was a volume of manga. But that's fine. You need that sometimes when life is busy and you don't have a lot of time to sit down and physically read. So please let me know if you have read any of these books, what you thought of them. Let me know what you read in March, and I will be very much looking forward to seeing you in another video soon. Bye!